I knew something was wrong the moment I saw my daughter Emily Carter standing at that county clerk's counter, her hands trembling as she slid the documents forward. From across the room, I watched the clerk Linda Brooks pause, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly. It was just a signature, a small detail most people would miss. But not her. Not today. And not when that signature was supposed to be mine. That was the moment my heart dropped because I realized my own daughter had just forged my name and she was about to be caught. If this story already has you holding your breath, take a moment to like and subscribe. It truly helps me share stories like this, and I'd really love to hear from you. What would you do if your own child betrayed your trust like this? Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I read every single comment. If you had asked me a year ago to describe my life, I would have told you it was quiet. Maybe even a little too quiet, but peaceful, in a way that only comes after you've survived enough storms. My name is Gloria Hayes. I'm 68 years old, and I've lived in the same modest brick house in Columbus, Ohio, for over 35 years. My husband Richard bought it for us when Emily was just a baby. Back then, the paint was fresh, the floors didn't creak, and our future felt wide open. We raised our daughter in that house. Every birthday, every Christmas, every tear, and every laugh. All of it lived within those walls. After Richard passed away 12 years ago, the house became something else. It wasn't just a home anymore. It was memory security. The last piece of a life we built together. I held on to it like you hold on to something you're afraid the world might try to take from you. And then there was Emily. Emily Carter, my only child. My whole world, if I'm being honest. When she was younger, we were inseparable. She used to sit at the kitchen counter while I cooked, telling me about her day, her friends, her dreams. She had this bright, curious mind, always asking questions, always wanting more out of life than what we had. I admired that about her. I still do, or at least I try to. As she grew older, things changed like they always do. She went to college, moved out for a while, built her own life. That's what you want for your children, isn't it? Independence, confidence, a life beyond your own. But somehow, after a few years, she came back. At first, it felt like a blessing. She said rent was too high, that she wanted to save money, maybe figure out her next step. I didn't ask too many questions. I was just happy to have her home again. The house felt alive in a way it hadn't in years. We found a rhythm again, though it wasn't quite the same as before. She had her own routines, her own space. She worked, at least that's what she told me, in marketing for a small company downtown. She would leave in the mornings dressed sharp, laptop bag over her shoulder, always in a hurry. "Big meeting today, Mom," she'd say, barely pausing at the door. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? At night, she would come home tired, sometimes quiet, sometimes distracted. We'd sit together for dinner occasionally, but more often than not, she'd say she had already eaten or that she wasn't hungry. I tried not to take it personally. People change. Life gets busy. Still, there were moments, small ones at first. I'd ask her how work was going, and she'd give me vague answers. "It's fine," or "same as always." No details, no stories. That wasn't like the Emily I raised. She used to tell me everything, down to the color of the coffee mug her coworker used. Then there were the late nights. At first, it was once a week, then twice, then more. She'd come home past midnight, sometimes even later, moving quietly through the house like she didn't want to wake me. But I'm a light sleeper these days. I heard the door every time. "Everything okay?" I asked her once when she came in around 1 in the morning. "Yeah, Mom. Just work stuff," she said quickly, already heading to her room. Work stuff. That phrase started to feel like a wall between us. I noticed other things, too. She started locking her bedroom door. Not always, but often enough that it stood out. And her phone, she never let it out of her sight. If it buzzed, she would check it immediately, sometimes turning the screen away if I happened to be nearby. One afternoon, I walked into the living room and saw her sitting on the couch, staring at her phone with this expression I couldn't quite place. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't exactly fear, either. It was tension. "Everything all right?" I asked. She looked up so quickly it startled me. "Yeah. Why wouldn't it be? I don't know," I said gently. "You just look a little stressed." "Fine, Mom," she replied, forcing a small smile. "Just work." She looked up so quickly it startled me. "Yeah, why wouldn't it be? I don't know," I said gently. "You just look a little stressed." "I'm fine, Mom," she replied, forcing a small smile. "Just work." Again that word, work. But something inside me, something quiet but persistent, started to whisper that things weren't as simple as she was making them seem. The real turning point came on a Sunday afternoon. We were sitting at the kitchen table, and she had her laptop open, typing quickly. I was reading a book, enjoying the rare moment of silence between us. Then her phone rang. She froze. Not just paused, froze. She looked at the screen, and I watched the color drain from her face. "Aren't you going to answer that?" I asked. She hesitated. "It's nothing." But the phone kept ringing. Finally, she picked it up and walked into the hallway, lowering her voice. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard enough. "I said I'm working on it," she whispered sharply. A pause. "No, you don't understand. Just give me more time." Another pause. "I'll fix it. I promise." Fix what? By the time she came back into the kitchen, her expression had changed. The tension was still there, but now it was mixed with something else, urgency, maybe even fear. "Who was that?" I asked carefully. "Just someone from work," she said, not meeting my eyes. I nodded, but something didn't sit right. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that my daughter was standing on the edge of something dangerous, and I had no idea what it was. I told myself I was overthinking, that I was just a worried mother, reading too much into things. After all, Emily was an adult. She had her own life, her own problems. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. And whatever it was already closer to home than I wanted to believe. The older you get, the more you learn to trust your instincts. It's not something anyone teaches you. It's something life carves into you over time, through mistakes, through loss, through moments when you ignored that quiet voice and paid the price for it. And lately, that voice wouldn't leave me alone, At first, I tried to dismiss it. I told myself I was just being a worried mother, that I was reading too much into small things. Emily was an adult. She had her own life, her own responsibilities. It wasn't my place to question every late night or every private phone call. But the problem with ignoring your instincts is that they don't go away. They get louder. One evening, about a week after that strange phone call, I overheard I was folding laundry in the living room when Emily walked in. She looked different. Not in a way I could immediately explain, but something about her energy had shifted. She was dressed nicer than usual. Not just work nice. This was something else. Her makeup was more polished, her hair carefully styled, and she was wearing a coat I had never seen before. "Going somewhere?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She hesitated for just a fraction of a second. "Just meeting someone from work." "Yeah," she said quickly, already reaching for her keys. There it was again, that hesitation, that tiny crack in the story. "Emily," I said gently, "you've been working a lot of late nights lately." She turned toward me, her expression tightening. "That's what happens when you have a job, Mom." The words weren't cruel, but the tone was sharp, defensive. I swallowed the hurt and nodded. "I know. I just worry about you." "I'm fine," she said a little too quickly. Then she added softer this time. "Really?" Before I could say anything else, she was out the door. I stood there for a moment, staring at the space she had just left behind. Something didn't feel right. Not just the words, but the way she said them. The way she avoided my eyes. The way she seemed rehearsed. That night, she didn't come home until nearly 2 in the morning. I heard the door open the soft click as she tried to close it quietly. I stayed in bed pretending to be asleep. Old habit. Sometimes, when you want the truth, you have to stop asking questions and start observing. Her footsteps moved slowly down the hallway. Then I heard her bedroom door close. And then silence. The next morning, I found her already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open. She looked tired, more than tired actually. Drained. "You're up early," I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "Couldn't sleep," she replied without looking up. I sat across from her, watching her fingers move across the keyboard. They were fast, precise, almost frantic. "What are you working on?" I asked. "Just catching up on some stuff." "What kind of stuff?" She stopped typing. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she slowly closed the laptop and finally looked at me. "Why are you asking so many questions lately?" she said. The words hit me harder than I expected. "I'm not trying to interrogate you," I said carefully. "I'm your mother. I just care." "I know," she said, but there was frustration in her voice. "But it feels like you don't trust me." That stung. "I do trust you," I said quietly. "I just don't understand what's going on." "There's nothing going on," she insisted. But this time, I didn't believe her. Not completely. Later that afternoon, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I went for a walk. It might sound simple, but for me it was a way to clear my head, to think without the weight of the house pressing in on me. I walked past familiar streets, past neighbors' houses, past places that hadn't changed in decades. But my thoughts, they wouldn't settle. Emily's voice kept replaying in my mind. "I'll fix it. I promise." "Fix what?" That question followed me all the way home. When I stepped inside, the house felt off. Quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful anymore. More like something was waiting to be noticed. I set my purse down and walked toward the kitchen. That's when I saw it. Emily's bag. She had left it on the chair by the table. Now I'm not the kind of person who goes through other people's belongings. I never have been. Even when Emily was a teenager, I respected her privacy. I believed trust went both ways. But that voice in my head, it was louder now. And for the first time, I hesitated. I stood there, staring at the bag, my heart beating faster than it should have been. This wasn't about curiosity anymore. It was about fear. Fear that something was happening right under my roof, and I was the only one who didn't know what it was. Slowly, almost reluctantly, I stepped closer. "Just a quick look," I whispered to myself, "just to make sure everything's okay." My hand hovered over the zipper, and then before I could change my mind, I opened it. Inside, I found the usual things at first: wallet, makeup, a notebook. But then I saw something that made my stomach drop. A folder. Not just any folder, one of those official-looking ones, the kind used for legal documents. Thick paper, neatly organized. My fingers trembled slightly as I pulled it out. I told myself I shouldn't look. I told myself to put it back. But I didn't, because deep down I already knew. Something was wrong, and whatever was inside that folder was about to prove it. I don't think anything prepares you for the moment when you realize the truth might be worse than your worst fear. That folder in my hands felt heavier than it should have. It was just paper-thin sheets neatly organized, but something about it carried weight. The kind of weight that presses against your chest before you even know why. I stood there in the kitchen staring down at it, my fingers trembling just enough for me to notice. "Put it back," I whispered to myself. But I didn't. Slowly, I opened it. The first page looked official, far more official than anything Emily should have been carrying around casually. There were printed headings, seals, structured formatting the kind you only see on legal or financial documents. My eyes scanned the page, trying to make sense of it. Then I saw it. My name. Gloria Hayes. It was typed clearly near the top under a section labeled Property Owner. For a second, my brain refused to process it. It felt surreal, like I was looking at something that didn't belong in my reality. Why would my name be on something like this in her bag? I turned the page. More details. Address. Legal descriptions. References to the house. My house. My breath caught in my throat. No, this doesn't make sense, I muttered under my breath. I flipped to the next page faster now, my heart beginning to pound. And that's when I saw it. A signature. My signature. Or at least something that looked like it. I stared at it for a long time, my eyes tracing every curve, every line. To anyone else, it would have looked perfectly normal, convincing even. But I knew my own name. I knew the way my hand moved when I signed it. The slight tilt in the G, the way the H in Hayes always looped just a little too wide. This wasn't it. It was close, too close, but it wasn't mine. A cold wave washed over me, starting at the back of my neck and spreading down my spine. Emily. My mind immediately went there, even though part of me didn't want it to. Even though part of me was still desperately searching for another explanation. But there wasn't one. She had access to my documents. She had been asking questions about the house. She had been acting strange. And now this. I flipped through the rest of the folder, my hands moving faster now, almost frantic. There were more pagesterms, conditions, references to finance IAL agreements. Words like collateral. I flipped through the rest of the folder, my hands moving faster now, almost frantic. There were more pages, terms, conditions, references to financial agreements. Words like collateral, authorization, transfer of rights. Each one felt like a blow. By the time I reached the last page, I could barely breathe. This wasn't just paperwork. This was something bigger, something serious, something dangerous. I closed the folder slowly, my hands shaking as I held it against my chest. The kitchen felt different now, smaller, colder, like the walls themselves had shifted while I wasn't looking. "She wouldn't do this," I whispered. But even as I said it, the doubt was already there. Because the truth was, I didn't know anymore. I didn't know what my daughter was capable of. I placed the folder back into her bag, exactly where I had found it. I made sure everything looked untouched. The last thing I needed was for her to know I had seen it. Not yet. Because I needed to understand. I needed to hear it from her. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. I tried to keep myself busy washing dishes that were already clean, rearranging things that didn't need rearranging. Anything to keep my mind from spiraling. But it didn't work. Every thought led back to the same place. Why? Why would she do this? And more importantly, what was she planning to do with it? By the time evening came, I was exhausted, Not physically, but emotionally. Drained in a way that made even simple things feel heavy. Emily came home just after 6. I heard the door open, her footsteps moving through the hallway. I stayed in the living room, sitting on the couch, my hands folded tightly in my lap. "Hey, Mom!" she called out. "Hey!" I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. She walked in a moment later, setting her bag down in the same chair where I had found it earlier. My eyes flicked to it instinctively, then back to her. "How was your day?" I asked. "Fine," she said, shrugging off her coat. "Busy." Of course it was. I watched her carefully searching for any signaling hint that she was carrying the same weight I had felt in that folder. But she seemed normal. Too normal. "Emily," I said before I could stop myself. She paused, turning toward me. "Yeah." There it was. The moment. I could feel it. My heart started to race, my chest tightening as the words gathered in my throat. I had planned to be calm, to approach this gently, to give her a chance to explain. But now that I was here, it wasn't so simple. "I need to ask you something," I said. Her expression shifted, just slightly, but enough for me to notice, a flicker of tension. "Okay," she said slowly. I hesitated, just for a second, because once I said it, there would be no going back. "Are you having any problems at work?" I asked instead. The words surprised even me. She blinked clearly, caught off guard. "What I mean," I continued, trying to sound casual. "You've seemed stressed lately. Late nights, phone calls, I just want to make sure you're okay." For a moment, she just stared at me. Then she let out a small laugh. Not a warm one, more like something forced. "I told you, Mom. Everything's fine. You're sure?" "Yes," she said firmly. There it was again. That wall. That distance. And in that moment, I realized something that hurt more than anything I had seen in that folder. She wasn't just hiding something. She was choosing to hide it from me. "I just worry," I said softly. "I know," she replied, her tone softening just a little. "But you don't have to. I've got everything under control." Under control? The words echoed in my mind long after she walked away. Because I had seen the truth. And whatever she thought she had under control, it was already slipping through her fingers. Once you see something like that, you can't unsee it. That night, after our conversation ended and Emily retreated to her room, I sat alone in the living room long after the lights should have been turned off. The house was quiet, but not the peaceful kind of quiet I used to know. This was something heavier. A silence filled with questions and no answers. I kept replaying everything in my head. The folder, the documents, my name, that signature. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw it again. That almost perfect imitation of something so personal, so unmistakably mine, and yet not. And the worst part wasn't just the act itself. It was the realization that she had done it without telling me, without asking, without trusting me enough to come to me first. I don't remember falling asleep that night, but I do remember waking up with that same weight sitting in my chest, and I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next morning, Emily left earlier than usual. "I've got a meeting," she said, grabbing her bag quickly, barely looking at me. "Emily!" I called out as she reached the door. She paused, her hand still on the knob. "Yeah." I hesitated. Again. The truth sat right there, ready to come out, but something stopped me. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the hope that I was wrong, that there was still some explanation that could make all of this make sense. Just be careful, I said instead. She gave me a small, distracted smile. I always am. And then she was gone. The moment the door closed, I exhaled slowly, like I had been holding my breath without realizing it. I stood there for a long time, staring at the door. Then I turned around and walked straight to the hallway closet. Inside, tucked neatly in a locked box, were the original documents for the house. The real ones. I hadn't looked at them in years. There was no reason to. They were safe, secure, untouched. Just like everything else in my life had been until recently. My hands felt steadier this time as I unlocked the box and pulled the papers out. If I was going to face this, I needed to know exactly how deep it went. I carried the documents to the kitchen table and laid them out carefully. The familiar texture of the paper, the official seals, the precise formatting, it all brought back memories of when Richard and I first signed them together. I could almost hear his voice again, teasing me about how serious I looked while signing my name. "Relax, Gloria," he had said back then with a smile. "It's just paperwork. If only it were still just paperwork." I found the page I was looking for. My signature. The real one. I stared at it for a long moment, letting the details settle into my mind. The natural flow, the slight imperfections, the way my hand had moved without thinking. Then I closed my eyes and pictured the one from Emily's folder. When I opened them again, the difference was clear. Not to a stranger. Not even to someone who only glanced at it. But to me, it was obvious. She had practiced. That thought hit me harder than anything else. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't something done in a moment of panic or desperation. This was planned, carefully, deliberately. I leaned back in my chair, my heart pounding again. But this time, it was mixed with something new. Not just fear, not just confusion, but anger. A quiet, controlled anger that I hadn't felt in a long time. "How long?" I whispered. How long had she been thinking about this? How long had she been preparing? And why? My eyes drifted across the rest of the documents. Everything was still there. Nothing seemed to be missing from the original set, which meant she hadn't taken them. She had copied them. Or worse, recreated them. I felt a chill run through me, because that meant she didn't just have access. She had knowledge. Enough knowledge to put something like that together. Enough knowledge to believe it might actually work. I gathered the papers and carefully returned them to the box, locking it again with a firm click. Then I stood there staring at the closet door. For the first time, a new thought crossed my mind. What if she had already tried to use those documents? What if I was already too late? That possibility sent a wave of urgency through me. I couldn't just sit here and wait anymore. I needed answers, real ones, and I needed them soon. That afternoon, I decided to do something I hadn't done before. I called the county office. My hands were steady as I dialed, but my heart wasn't. It pounded in my chest as I listened to the phone ring. "Franklin County Records Office, how can I help you?" A woman's voice answered. "Hi," I said, forcing my voice to remain calm. "My name is Gloria Hayes. I wanted to ask about property records." "Of course. What specifically are you looking for?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "I just want to confirm that there haven't been any recent changes or filings related to my property." There was a brief pause as she typed. "Let me check that for you, Ms. Hayes." I held my breath. Seconds passed, then more. Each one felt longer than the last. "All right," she said finally. "I don't see any completed changes or transfers on your property." I exhaled, a small wave of relief washing over me. But then she added something that made my stomach tighten again. "However, there was an inquiry made recently." About a potential filing. My grip on the phone tightened. An inquiry, I repeated. Yes, it looks like someone requested information about documentation requirements for property authorization. It didn't go through, but the inquiry is logged. When was this, I asked. 2 days ago. 2 days. That meant Emily. Do you know who made the inquiry? I asked, even though I already suspected the answer. I'm sorry, ma'am. I can't release that information. Of course, I said, quietly. After I hung up, I sat there in silence, the phone still in my hand. 2 days ago. She hadn't completed anything yet, but she had tried, and that meant one thing. Whatever she was planning, she wasn't done. Once you realize something is wrong, really wrong, your mind stops looking for comfort and starts looking for patterns. That was where I found myself the next day. Not confused anymore, not in denial, but watching, listening, connecting. Because now I knew this wasn't just about one bad decision. This wasn't something Emily woke up one morning and impulsively chose to do. This had layers, and somewhere inside those layers was the reason. That evening, I made a decision. I was going to stop asking vague questions. I was going to listen, really listen. Emily came home later than usual again. It was close to 10 when I heard the front door open. I stayed in the kitchen, pretending to wipe down the counter, giving myself a reason to be there without making it obvious I was waiting. Hey, she said softly as she walked in. Hey, I replied, glancing up briefly. She looked tired again, but there was something else this time. Not just exhaustion, something tighter. Like a string pulled too far. She set her bag down and went straight to the sink, washing her hands longer than necessary. How was your day? I asked. Fine, she said, her back still turned to me. Always fine. I watched her carefully. Emily, I said, keeping my tone light, do you ever feel like work is getting a little overwhelming? She froze. Just for a second. But it was enough. I continued as if I hadn't noticed, you've been under a lot of pressure lately. Late nights calls, I just don't want you burning yourself out. She turned off the faucet, slowly drying her hands with a paper towel. I said, I'm fine, Mom, she replied, her voice tighter now. I know you keep saying that, I said gently, but sometimes people say that when they're not. She turned to face me, her eyes sharper than before. Why are you doing this? She asked. Doing what? This she said, gesturing between us. The questions. The constant checking up on me. I'm not checking up on you, I said softly. I'm trying to understand you. I don't need you to understand me, she snapped. The words hung in the air heavy and cold. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she looked away first. I'm just tired, okay? She said, her voice softer now. Can we not do this tonight? I nodded slowly. Of course. But inside, something shifted. Because that reaction, it wasn't just irritation. It was fear. Later that night, I stayed up again. Not in the living room this time. In the hallway. I know how that sounds. Maybe it's not something I would have admitted to anyone before. But when you feel like something is slipping out of your control, you start doing things you never thought you would. I waited until the house was quiet. Then I stepped out of my room. Emily's door was closed, but not locked this time. A faint light glowed from underneath it. I moved closer, my footsteps as soft as I could manage, and then I heard it. Her voice. Low. Urgent. I told you I'm working on it. A pause. No, you said that last time too, a man's voice replied. Faint but clear enough through the door. My heart dropped. Jason, It had to be him. I just need a little more time, Emily whispered. You don't have more time, he said sharply. Do you understand me? This isn't a game. I know that, she said, her voice shaking slightly. I'm trying. Trying isn't enough, he cut her off. You said you could handle this. I can, she insisted quickly. I just need the paperwork to go through. Paperwork. My chest tightened. What's the delay, he demanded. There was a question, she admitted. At the office. What kind of question? A signature issue, she said, her voice barely audible now. Silence followed. Then his tone changed. Colder. More dangerous. Emily, he said slowly. You told me that wouldn't be a problem. It won't be, she said quickly. I can fix it. You better, he replied. Because if you don't, you're going to have a much bigger problem than a clerk asking questions. My stomach turned. What does that mean? She asked, her voice trembling. It means, he said, his words sharp and deliberate, you owe money. Real money. And people don't like waiting. Another silence, longer this time. I'll take care of it, Emily said finally. I promise. You have 2 days, he replied. And then the call ended. I stood there in the hallway, frozen. 2 days. That was all she had. And whatever she was trying to do, it wasn't just about desperation anymore. It was about pressure, real pressure, the kind that pushes people into decisions they can't undo. I stepped back quietly, returning to my room before she could open the door and find me there. But sleep didn't come. Not that night. Because now I understood something I hadn't fully seen before. This wasn't just about my daughter making a mistake. She was in trouble. And not the kind that goes away with an apology or a second chance. The kind that pulls you deeper the longer you try to fix it. And the worst part, she thought she had to face it alone. I sat there in the dark, staring at the wall, my mind racing. 2 days, that's what he gave her. Which meant, whatever she was planning to do with those documents, she was about to try again. There's a moment as a parent when you realize that protecting your child doesn't always mean shielding them from consequences. Sometimes it means stepping directly into the storm with them. That night, after everything I had heard, I didn't sleep at all. 2 days. That was the timeline. 2 days before whatever pressure Emily was under turned into something worse. 2 days before she made a decision she couldn't undo. 2 days before the situation spiraled completely out of control. And I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I could not let her go through with it. The next morning, I was already awake when Emily came into the kitchen. I had made coffee, though I hadn't touched mine. I was sitting at the table, hands wrapped around the mug, waiting. She paused when she saw me. You're up early? She said, her voice cautious. So are you? I replied. She gave a small shrug, moving toward the counter. Couldn't sleep. Neither could I. For a moment, the silence stretched between us again. But this time, I didn't let it settle. Emily. I said, my voice calm but firm. She froze slightly, then turned to face me. Yeah, we need to talk. Her shoulders tensed immediately. About what? I stood, slowly setting my mug down. My heart was pounding, but my voice stayed steady. About the documents in your bag. The color drained from her face. For a second, she didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even blink. And in that moment, I saw it. Not just fear, but guilt. What documents, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Don't do that, I said quietly. Not with me. Her eyes flickered, searching my face, trying to read how much I knew. I saw them, Emily. That was all it took. Her composure cracked. You went through my things? she said, her voice rising slightly, not with anger, but with panic. I didn't want to, I said honestly, but something didn't feel right, and now I know why. She shook her head, stepping back slightly. You don't understand. Then help me understand. I interrupted, my voice firm now. Because right now, all I see is my name on documents I didn't sign, and a signature that looks like mine, but isn't. Tears welled up in her eyes instantly. It's not what you think, she said quickly. Then tell me what it is, I replied. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. The silence that followed was unbearable. Emily, I said more softly. Now I heard your phone call last night. That hit her like a physical blow. Her eyes widened. What I didn't mean to listen, I said, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. But I heard enough. Her breathing became uneven. 2 days, I continued. That's what he gave you, right? She stared at me, completely exposed now. And then she broke. I didn't have a choice, she cried. The words came out suddenly raw and desperate. I didn't have a choice, Mom. Yes, you did, I said gently. You always have a choice. Not this time, she said, shaking her head violently. You don't understand. He's not just going to walk away if I don't pay him back. Pay him back for what I asked. She hesitated, then looked away. For money, she said quietly. What money? Another pause. I borrowed some, she admitted. How much? She didn't answer. Emily. I said, my voice tightening slightly. How much? Her eyes filled with tears again. More than I can pay back, she whispered. A cold weight settled in my chest. And this man? I continued carefully. Jason is the one you owe? She nodded slowly. And you thought forging my signature on legal documents was the way to fix that? I wasn't trying to hurt you, she said quickly, stepping toward me. I was trying to fix everything before you even knew there was a problem. By risking the house? I asked, my voice breaking slightly. By putting everything your father and I built on the line, I was going to fix it, she insisted. I just needed the loan to go through, and then I could pay him back, and everything would go back to normal. That's not how this works, I said firmly. You don't know that, she snapped. I do know that, I replied, my voice steady again. Because I've seen what happens when people try to solve one bad decision with another. She stared at me, her expression a mix of frustration and desperation. I didn't have time to think it through, she said. He kept pushing, calling, threatening how I asked. She hesitated. Emily, he said if I didn't pay him back, he'd make things worse, she admitted quietly. What does that mean? I don't know, she said, shaking her head. He sounded serious. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This isn't just about money, is it? I asked. She didn't answer. Emily, is he dangerous? Another silence. Then, a small nod. That was enough. In that moment, everything became clear. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a situation, a dangerous one. And my daughter was right in the middle of it. Listen to me, I said, stepping closer to her. You are not going to submit those documents. I have to, she said immediately. I don't have another option. Yes, you do, I said firmly. You have me. She shook her head. You can't fix this. Maybe not all of it, I admitted, but I can help you face it the right way. And what if that's not enough? She asked, her voice breaking. Then we figure out what is I said. She looked at me for a long moment, searching my face. But I need you to trust me, I added, and I need you to stop lying to me. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I was trying to protect you, she whispered. No, I said gently. You were trying to protect yourself from disappointing me. She broke down completely, then covering her face as she cried. And for the first time in days, I stepped forward and held her, because no matter what she had done, she was still my daughter. And I wasn't going to let her fall alone. After that moment in the kitchen, something changed between us. Not broken, no, it had already been cracked long before that, but exposed. Raw. Honest in a way we hadn't been with each other in a very long time. Emily stayed close to me for the rest of that morning. Not physically, she moved around the house like she always did, but emotionally, there was a shift. The distance she had built over the past weeks, it was gone. In its place was something else, fear. And underneath that, a fragile kind of trust. I have to go out later, she said quietly as we sat at the kitchen table, neither of us really eating. I looked up at her. Where? She hesitated, then answered. The county office. I have to go out later, she said quietly as we sat at the kitchen table, neither of us really eating. I looked up at her. Where? She hesitated, then answered. The county office. There it was, the moment we had both been circling around. You're going to try again? I said. It wasn't a question. She nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on the table. I don't have a choice. You do, I said gently. You just don't like the alternatives. She looked up at me, her expression tightening. If I don't do this, he's going to come after me. And if you do this, I replied, you could lose everything, not just the house. Your future? I already might lose everything, she said, her voice trembling. That stopped me, because she wasn't being dramatic. She believed it. Emily, I said softly, leaning forward. Look at me. She did. You are not alone in this anymore, I told her. Whatever happens next, we face it together. Tears welled up in her eyes again, but this time she didn't look away. You don't understand how far this has gone, she whispered. Then help me understand, I said. She took a shaky breath. I met Jason about 6 months ago, she began. At first, he was perfect. He said all the right things. He listened. He made me feel like I wasn't stuck. Stuck, I repeated. She nodded slightly. In life. In this house. In everything. The words stung more than I expected, but I didn't interrupt. He had plans, she continued. Big ones. Investments, business opportunities. Things I didn't really understand, but he made them sound real. And you trusted him, I said. I did, she admitted. At first, it was small. A little money here and there. He said it would come back quickly. That we were building something. But it didn't, I said. She shook her head. No. And every time something went wrong, there was always a reason. Always a new opportunity to fix it. My stomach tightened. And you kept giving him more, I said quietly. She nodded again, tears slipping down her cheeks. Until I couldn't anymore, she said. And that's when everything changed. How? He stopped being nice, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He started pushing, calling all the time, showing up unexpectedly, saying I owed him. Owed him? I frowned. For what? For covering the losses, she said. For introducing me to the deals. For everything. That's not how it works, I said firmly. I know that now, she replied. But at the time, I was already in too deep. The room felt heavier with every word. So, you thought I hesitated choosing my words carefully? You thought using the house was the only way out. I thought it was the fastest way, she corrected. The only way to get enough money quickly. At what cost? I asked. She didn't answer. Because she knew. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. All right, I said finally. Then we're going, I said finally. Then we're going, the county office. Her head snapped up. What? You're not doing this alone? I said. If you're going, I'm going with you. No, she said, immediately. Why? I can't let you. You already have G to the county office. Her head snapped up. What? You're not doing this alone, I said. If you're going, I'm going with you. No, she said immediately. I can't let you. You already have, I interrupted gently. The moment you put my name on those documents, I became part of this. She shook her head. If they find out, they will, I said. Eventually, and it's better they hear the truth than a lie that falls apart under scrutiny. Her breathing became uneven again. I don't know if I can do that, she whispered. You can, I said firmly, because I'll be right there with you. For a long moment, she just stared at me. Then slowly, she nodded. The county office felt colder than I remembered. Maybe it was the lighting, or the quiet hum of people working behind counters, or maybe it was just the weight of what we had brought with us. Emily walked beside me, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. I could feel the tension radiating from her. Just breathe, I murmured softly. She nodded, but her eyes stayed fixed ahead. And then we saw her, the clerk from the other day. Linda Brooks. She was standing behind the counter reviewing a stack of papers, her expression focused and sharp. Emily's steps slowed. That's her, she whispered. I know, I said. For a second, it looked like she might turn around, walk away, run from it. But then she took a deep breath and kept moving. We approached the counter. Linda looked up. Her eyes moved from Emily to me, and something in her expression shifted slightly. Recognition. Can I help you? She asked. Emily opened her mouth, but no words came out. So I stepped forward. Yes, I said calmly. I believe my daughter was here recently with some documents. Linda's gaze sharpened immediately. Yes, she said slowly. I remember. I'd like to review those documents, I continued, and clarify something before anything moves forward. Emily's hand brushed against mine, shaking. Linda glanced between us, then nodded. Of course. As she turned to retrieve the file, I felt Emily's grip tighten slightly. This is it, she whispered. Yes, I said quietly. And for the first time since this all began, we were facing it together. There are moments in life when everything seems to slow down, when a single second stretches long enough for you to feel every possible outcome at once. Standing at that counter beside my daughter, I felt all of it. Fear, regret, hope, and something else, something steadier. Resolve. Linda Brooks returned with a thin file in her hands, placing it carefully on the counter between us. Her movements were precise, practiced. She had done this many times before, handled documents, verified signatures, caught inconsistencies. But this time, we weren't just another routine case. I could feel it. This is the submission your daughter brought in, she said, glancing briefly at Emily before turning her attention to me. There were a few discrepancies that needed clarification. Emily's fingers tightened around mine. I squeezed back gently. It's all right, I whispered. Linda opened the file and turned it toward us. And there it was again. The document. The one I had seen in Emily's bag. But somehow it looked worse here. More real. More official. More dangerous. This section here, Linda said, pointing to the signature line, is where the issue came up. I leaned forward, forcing myself to look at it directly. My name, written in ink, but not by me. We compare all submitted signatures with the ones on file, Linda continued. In this case, there were subtle differences. Emily's breathing became uneven beside me. I noticed inconsistencies in the lettering Linda said, tapping lightly near the signature, particularly in the capital letters and the spacing. I nodded slowly. Yes, I said, I see that. Linda looked at me more closely now. Are you the property owner, Ms. Hayes? I am, I replied. And did you sign this document? There it was, the question. The moment everything came to a head. I felt Emily's grip tighten even more, her entire body tense beside me. For a brief second, I hesitated, because I knew what this answer would do. It would expose everything. It would confirm what Linda already suspected. It would set events in motion that we couldn't stop. But I also knew something else. Lies had brought us here. Truth was the only way forward. No, I said firmly. I did not sign that document. The air shifted immediately. Linda straightened slightly, her expression sharpening. I see, she said carefully. Emily let out a small, shaky breath. I need to be clear. Linda continued, her tone professional but firm. Submitting falsified documents, especially involving property ownership, is a serious matter. I understand, I said. Ma'am, she said, turning to Emily now. Did you submit this document? Emily froze. For a moment, I thought she might deny it again. That fear would take over and push her back into the same pattern of avoidance. But then something changed. She swallowed hard and nodded. Yes, she said quietly. I did. Linda held her gaze for a moment, as if measuring her response. Do you understand the implications of that? She asked. Emily's voice trembled, but she didn't look away this time. Yes, she said. Can you explain why you did it? Silence, heavy, unavoidable. I felt Emily hesitate beside me, her fear rising again. So I stepped in not to speak for her, but to support her. She was under pressure, I said calmly. From someone who took advantage of her. Linda's eyes shifted back to me. That may be the case, she said, but it doesn't change the nature of the submission. I know, I replied, and we're not here to pretend it does. That seemed to register. Linda leaned back slightly, her posture relaxing just a fraction. So, what exactly are you here for today? She asked. To stop this, I said simply. Emily turned to look at me, surprise flickering across her face. I continued steady and clear. We're withdrawing the submission, completely. Linda nodded slowly. That can be done. And, I added, we want to make sure nothing moves forward from this filing. No processing, no further review. That's already on hold, Linda said, given the discrepancies. Good, I said. Emily let out a breath she had clearly been holding. But Linda wasn't finished. There's something else you need to understand, she said, her tone shifting slightly. Even if the submission doesn't proceed, the attempt itself is still recorded. My heart tightened. In cases like this, she continued, there may be a review process, depending on the circumstances. Emily's fingers trembled in mine. What kind of review? I asked. It depends, Linda said. Sometimes it's internal. Sometimes it escalates. To legal, I clarified. She nodded. Emily's grip faltered. I could feel her fear spiking again, threatening to overwhelm her. So I stepped closer, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. We're not running from that, I said firmly. She looked at me, eyes wide. Whatever comes next, I continued, we face it the right way. Linda studied us for a moment. Then something in her expression softened. Honesty matters, she said, especially now. I know, I replied. She closed the file carefully. I'll mark this submission as withdrawn and note the discrepancy, she said. That's the best step forward from here. Thank you, I said. Emily nodded silently. As we turned to leave, I felt her hand slip into mine again. This time, not out of fear, but something else. Relief. But it was fragile, because we both knew this wasn't the end. As we stepped outside into the daylight, Emily stopped suddenly. I thought once I submitted it, everything would get better, she said softly. I turned to her, but it just kept getting worse. I nodded. That's how these things work, I said gently. Shortcuts don't fix problems, they multiply them. She looked down at the ground, her shoulders heavy. What happens now? She asked. I took a deep breath. Now, I said, we deal with the real problem. Jason. The name hung between us without needing to be spoken. Because the truth was, stopping the document was only the first step. The real danger was still out there. The moment we stepped out of the county office, the air felt different, not lighter, just clearer, like a storm that hadn't passed yet, but had finally revealed itself in full. Emily walked beside me in silence, her steps slower than usual. I could tell her mind was racing, replaying everything that had just happened. The clerk's questions, my answers, her confession. But now, there was no more hiding. And that made everything more real. What are we going to do about him? She asked quietly as we reached the car. I didn't need to ask who she meant. Jason. I took a moment before answering, unlocking the door, but not getting in right away. First, I said, turning to face her, you're going to tell me everything. Not just pieces of it. Everything. She nodded slowly. I will, she said. I promise. We got into the car, but instead of starting the engine, I sat there waiting. This is where we stop running, I added. Emily took a deep breath. And then she started talking. It wasn't just loans, she said, staring straight ahead. At least, not at first. I listened carefully, saying nothing. He told me he was investing in short-term property deals, she continued, buying undervalued homes, flipping them quickly, making profits. He made it sound simple. Did you ever see any proof? I asked. A little, she admitted. Documents, pictures, things that looked real. But weren't, I said. She shook her head. I don't know anymore. Go on. At first I gave him a few thousand, she said. Savings I had, he said it would double within weeks. And did it? No, she said quietly. There was always a reason. Delays, unexpected costs. But he kept showing me new opportunities, new deals that would make up for the losses. I felt a familiar heaviness settle in my chest. He kept you chasing the loss, I said. She nodded, and every time I hesitated, he would push harder. Make it sound like I'd already come too far to stop. How much, Emily? I asked again. This time, she answered. 42,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. 42, I repeated softly, struggling to process it. I know, she said quickly. I know how it sounds. How did you even... I used everything, she interrupted. Savings, credit cards, personal loans, I even borrowed from a friend. I told her it was for a business idea. I closed my eyes briefly, trying to steady myself. And when you couldn't pay him back, I asked. That's when he changed, she said. He stopped pretending. He started talking about consequences. What kind of consequences? He said people were involved. She replied, her voice shaking. That he wasn't the only one expecting money? My stomach turned, and you believed him. I didn't know what to believe, she said, but I knew one thing: I was in trouble. Silence filled the car again. And that's when you came up with the house, I said. She nodded slowly. I knew it was wrong, she admitted, but it felt like the only way to get enough money fast. A loan against the property, just enough to pay him off. And then what I asked? I would fix everything, she said quickly. Get a job again, pay it back over time, you'd never even know. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time I saw it clearly. She hadn't been trying to hurt me. She had been trying to fix a mistake in the worst possible way. Emily, I said gently, that kind of plan doesn't fix things. It buries them deeper. I know that now, she whispered. I took a deep breath. Does he know you're not going through with it? I asked. She shook her head. Not yet. And when is he expecting the money? Tomorrow, she said. Of course. 2 days, just like he said. Then we don't have much time, I replied. Her hands tightened in her lap. What if he comes here? She asked. I considered that. He might, I said honestly. But we're not going to let him control this situation anymore. How? She asked. I turned to face her fully. By doing something he doesn't expect. She frowned slightly. Like what? By not playing his game, I said. She didn't respond right away, because she didn't understand yet. And honestly, part of me was still figuring it out myself. But there was one thing I knew for certain. We're going to the police, I said. Her head snapped toward me. What she said, panic rising instantly. No, I can't. Yes, you can, I said firmly. They'll arrest me, she said. I forged documents, and you confessed it before it was processed, I replied. You withdrew it. That matters. But it still happened. I know, I said, and we're not pretending it didn't. But right now, the bigger threat is him. She stared at me, torn between fear and logic. He's the one manipulating you, I continued. He's the one making threats. That's not just a financial issue. That's something more serious. Her breathing slowed slightly. You really think they'll help? She asked. I think it's the safest option we have, I said. She looked down, thinking. And if they don't? She whispered. I reached over, placing my hand over hers. Then we find another way, I said, but we don't face this alone. She was quiet for a long time. Then finally she nodded. Okay, she said softly. And just like that, the direction of everything changed. Because for the first time since this started, we weren't reacting anymore. We were taking control. But deep down, I knew something else too. Jason wasn't the kind of man who would simply disappear when things got complicated. If anything, this was the moment he would push harder. And we had just made our first move against him. There's a certain kind of fear that doesn't fade once you decide to face it. It changes shape. It becomes sharper, more focused, less about the unknown and more about what you now know is coming. That was the kind of fear I felt as we drove home from the county office. Not panic, not confusion, but anticipation. Because we had just made a choice, one that Jason would not like. And men like him, They don't respond well when they lose control. Emily sat beside me in silence, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Every few seconds, she would glance at her phone, then quickly look away. "Has he called?" I asked. She shook her head. "Not yet." "That doesn't mean he won't," I said. "I know," she whispered. We pulled into the driveway, and for a moment, neither of us moved. The house stood there exactly as it always had, quiet, familiar, unchanged. But it didn't feel the same, because now it wasn't just our home. It was a place that could be found, a place that could be targeted. "You think he knows where I live?" Emily asked suddenly, as if reading my thoughts. I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, I didn't know. But I also didn't want to lie. "It's possible," I said carefully. "If he's been dealing with you for this long, he may have found out." Her face went pale. "I never told him directly," she said quickly. "But he's picked me up before. Dropped me off near the street." "That's enough," I said quietly. Silence fell between us again. Then I reached for the door handle. "Come on," I said. "Let's go inside." The house felt different the moment we stepped in. Not physically, but emotionally, like the walls had absorbed everything that had happened and were now waiting for what came next. Emily set her bag down slowly, her movements hesitant. "What do we do now?" she asked. I took a deep breath. "We prepare," I said. "For what?" "For whatever he does next." She swallowed hard. "I don't think he's just going to let this go," she said. "I don't either," I replied. Her phone buzzed. We both froze. She stared at the screen, her face draining of color. "It's him," she whispered. "Answer it," I said calmly. "What?" "Answer it," I repeated, but put it on speaker. Her hands trembled as she tapped the screen. "Hello," she said, her voice barely steady. Emily Jason's voice came through immediately, smooth, controlled, but underneath it something colder. "I've been trying to reach you," he said. "I've been busy," she replied. "Busy," he repeated, a hint of amusement creeping into his tone. "I hope that means you have good news for me." Emily glanced at me. I nodded slightly. "I went to the office today," she said, and he pressed. "I didn't submit the documents," she said. Silence, heavy, dangerous. Then his voice changed. "Completely. What did you just say?" he asked, his tone dropping. "I didn't go through with it," she repeated, her voice shaking now. Another pause. Longer this time. And then, "You think this is optional?" he said quietly. "It's not going to work," she said quickly. "They noticed the signature." "I don't care about the signature," he snapped. "I care about my money. I told you I'm trying." "No," he cut her off sharply. "You're not trying. You're stalling. I'm not." "You had one job," he said. "One." My jaw tightened as I listened. This wasn't pressure. This was control. And it was escalating. "You don't understand what you're doing," he continued. "You think walking away fixes this. It doesn't." "I'm not walking away," Emily said, her voice breaking. "I just need more time." "You don't have more time," he said coldly. "We can figure something else out." "No," he said. "You had your chance." My heart started to pound, because I could hear it now. The shift. The line we were crossing. "What happens if I don't?" Emily asked, her voice barely a whisper. There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his voice was calm. Too calm. "Then I come to you," he said. Emily's breath caught. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means he said slowly. You don't get to ignore this anymore. My hand tightened into a fist. Jason, I said, stepping closer. There was a brief silence. Who's that? He asked. That's her mother, I said firmly. Gloria Hayes. Another pause, then a soft, humorless chuckle. Well, he said, this just got interesting. She's not doing anything else for you, I said. This ends now. You think you can just step in and fix this? He asked. No, I replied, but I can make sure she's not alone. His tone hardened immediately. You should stay out of this, he said. This doesn't concern you. It absolutely does, I said. The moment my name was involved, it became my problem. Silence again. Then, you don't know what you're dealing with, he said. Maybe not, I replied, but I know enough to recognize manipulation when I hear it. A sharp exhale came through the phone. Listen carefully, he said. This isn't over. It is, I said firmly. No, he replied. It's just getting started. And then, the line went dead. The silence that followed felt louder than the conversation itself. Emily stared at the phone in her hand, her entire body trembling. He's going to come here, she whispered. I took a slow breath. Maybe, I said. Her eyes filled with panic. What do we do? I stepped closer to her, placing my hands gently on her shoulders. We don't panic, I said. But we don't panic, I repeated firmly. She swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. Because this is exactly what he wants, I continued. Fear, control, reaction. And what if he shows up? She asked. Then we're ready, I said. How? I held her gaze, because now I said quietly, we're not hiding anymore. And for the first time since this all began, the fear in her eyes shifted, just slightly. Not gone, but different. Because now she wasn't facing it alone. The hours after that call felt like waiting for something you couldn't stop. Not a possibility, not a maybe, but something inevitable. Emily stayed close to me that afternoon, moving from room to room, as if being alone, even for a few minutes, was something she couldn't handle anymore. I didn't blame her. Fear like that, it lingers in your bones. You really think we should go to the police? She asked again, her voice quieter now, less panicked, but still unsure. Yes, I said, and the sooner the better. What if he finds out she pressed? What if that makes things worse? I turned to face her. Emily, I said gently, things are already worse. The difference is, now we're choosing how we respond to it. She didn't argue with that, because she knew it was true. We left the house just before sunset. I locked the door behind us, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not just concern for my daughter, but a sense of responsibility. Not just to protect her, but to make sure she never found herself in a situation like this again. The police station was quieter than I expected. Not empty, but calm. Structured. A place where chaos was supposed to be contained and understood. Emily hesitated at the entrance. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. I reached for her hand. You already are, I said softly. You're here. She nodded, taking a slow breath, and together we walked in. The officer at the front desk was a middle-aged man with a steady, observant expression. He looked up as we approached. Can I help you? He asked. Yes, I said. We'd like to report a situation involving fraud and possible threats. His posture shifted slightly. All right, he said. Let's step into an interview room. Emily's hand tightened around mine again, but this time she didn't pull away. The room was simple. A table, a few chairs, a notepad. Nothing intimidating, but the weight of what we were about to say, it filled the space. "My name is Gloria Hayes," I began. "And this is my daughter, Emily Carter." The officer nodded, jotting down notes. "Go ahead," he said. I glanced at Emily. She nodded, and then she told him everything. Not pieces, not softened versions. Everything. Jason. The money. The pressure. The threats. The forged documents. Her voice shook at first, but as she continued, something changed. She steadied. Because truth, even when it's painful, has a kind of clarity that lies never do. When she finished, the room was quiet. The officer leaned back slightly, considering everything. "All right," he said finally. "You did the right thing by coming here." Emily let out a breath she had clearly been holding. "What happens now?" she asked. "We take this seriously," he said. "What you've described involves fraud, coercion, and potentially extortion." My chest tightened. "So he can be stopped?" I asked. "Possibly," he replied. "But we'll need to build a case. That means documentation, communication records, anything you have." Emily nodded quickly. "I have texts, call logs, emails." "Good," he said. "That helps." "And what about her?" I asked, my voice quieter now. "The document she submitted, even though it was withdrawn." The officer looked at Emily. "You came forward before it was processed," he said. "That matters. It shows intent to correct the situation." Emily swallowed hard. "So I'm not going to be arrested?" she asked. "Right now," he said, "our focus is on the individual who manipulated you into this situation." Relief washed over her face, but it didn't erase the guilt. I could still see it. "And what about him coming here?" I asked. The officer's expression grew more serious. "If he's making threats," he said, "we can take steps. Patrol checks documentation, and if necessary, a restraining order." Emily looked at me, her fear shifting again, this time towards something more grounded. "Do you think hell actually show up?" she asked. The officer didn't sugarcoat it. "It's possible," he said. "People like that don't like losing control." That confirmed what I already suspected. "And if he does," I asked. "Call us immediately," he said. "Do not engage. Do not open the door." I nodded. "We won't." He handed us a card. "This is my direct line," he added. "If anything happens, you call me." Emily took it carefully like it was something fragile. "Thank you," she said quietly. The drive home felt different. Not safe, but supported. There's a difference. Fear still sat between us, but now it had somewhere to go. Somewhere to be directed. Something to be done about it. "He's not as powerful as I thought," Emily said softly, staring out the window. "No," I said. "He just made you believe he was—" She nodded slowly. "I feel stupid," she admitted. "You're not," I said firmly. "I should have seen it," she continued. "All the signs." "Emily," I interrupted gently. "People like him are very good at what they do. They don't just trick you. They study you. They find your weak spots and build their lies around them." She was quiet for a moment. Then she whispered, "I didn't want to disappoint you." That broke something in me. "Listen to me," I said, my voice soft but firm. "You don't lose my love because you make a mistake." Tears filled her eyes again. "You lose yourself," I added, "when you keep hiding from it." She nodded slowly, and for the first time, I saw something new in her expression. Not fear, not guilt, but understanding. When we got home, The house was just as we left it. Still. Quiet. But now we were different. We stepped inside together, closing the door behind us. And for the first time since this began, we weren't waiting anymore. We were ready. But deep down, I knew one thing. Jason wasn't finished. And whatever he did next would be his biggest mistake. That night, I didn't turn on the television. I didn't make dinner the way I usually did, moving out of habit and pretending everything was normal. There was nothing normal about any of this anymore. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with Emily, a notepad between us. Both of us trying to gather everything we knew. Every message, every detail, every piece that could help us understand just how deep this situation really went. Start from the beginning, I said gently. Everything you can remember about him. Emily nodded, her hands wrapped tightly around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. He said he worked in real estate, she began, that he had connections, investors, partners, people who moved money quickly. Did he ever show you proof of those connections, I asked. She hesitated. Just names, she admitted, and some documents, contracts, I think. But now I don't know if any of it was real. I nodded slowly. That's how people like him operate, I said. They give you just enough to believe, but never enough to verify. She swallowed hard. I should have known, she whispered. No, I said firmly. You should have had someone to help you question it. She looked up at me, surprised by that. I didn't tell you, she said. That doesn't mean I wasn't supposed to be there, I replied. Silence settled between us again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was reflective. So, what do we do now? She asked. I leaned back slightly, considering everything we had learned. We stay ahead of him, I said. How? By not reacting emotionally, I replied. By thinking clearly, strategically. She frowned slightly. Like what? Like understanding what he really wants, I said. Money? She answered immediately. Yes, I said, but more than that, control. Leverage. She thought about that. And right now, I continued. He thinks he still has leverage over you. Her expression tightened. But he doesn't, I added. She looked at me. Because you've taken away his biggest tool, I said. Secrecy? Something clicked in her eyes. He can't threaten you with something that's already been exposed, I explained. Not in the same way. But he could still come here, she said quietly. Yes, I said. He could. The room went still again. And if he does? She asked. I met her gaze. Then we handle it, I said calmly. It happened sooner than I expected. There's something about intuition when you listen to it long enough, it starts to feel less like guessing and more like knowing. Around 9 that evening, there was a knock on the door. Not loud, not aggressive, just deliberate. Emily froze. Her entire body went rigid, her eyes low. Her entire body went rigid, her eyes locking onto mine. That's him, she whispered. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stood up slowly, my heart beating steadily, not racing, not panicking, just present. Stay here, I said quietly. She grabbed my arm. Note on open it teeking onto mine. That's him, she whispered. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stood up slowly, my heart beating steadily, not racing, not panicking, just present. Stay here, I said quietly. She grabbed my arm. Note on open it, she said, panic rising again. I'm not going to open it, I reassured her. I moved toward the door, each step measured. The knock came again. 3 times. Even. Controlled. not the behavior of someone uncertain, the behavior of someone who believed he had the right to be there. I stopped just short of the door. "Who is it?" I called out. A brief pause. Then, "It's Jason," came the reply. His voice, calm, almost polite, but underneath it something else. "I think we need to talk," he added. I felt Emily's presence behind me now, her breath unsteady. "No," I said firmly, "we don't." Silence, then a quiet chuckle. "I think you do," he replied, "because this situation, it doesn't go away just because you ignore it." I leaned slightly closer to the door, my voice steady. "We're not ignoring it," I said. "We've reported it." That stopped him. Not completely, but enough. "Reported it," he repeated. "Yes," I said. "Everything." Another pause, longer this time, and when he spoke again, the tone had changed. Subtly. "You think that's going to help you?" he asked. "I think it already has," I replied. Behind me, I could feel Emily holding her breath. "You've made this more complicated than it needed to be," he said. "No," I said. "You did." Silence again, and this time I heard it. A shift, a calculation, because this wasn't going the way he expected. "You don't understand how this works," he said finally. "Then explain it to the police," I replied. That did it. For the first time, his composure cracked. "Careful," he said, his voice tightening slightly. "You don't want to make enemies you can't handle." I didn't hesitate. "I'm not afraid of you," I said. It wasn't bravado. It wasn't reckless. It was truth. Because fear only works when it stays hidden, and we weren't hiding anymore. Another long pause. "Then, you're making a mistake," he said quietly. "No," I replied. "You already did." The silence that followed felt final. And then footsteps. Fading. Moving away from the door. I didn't move for several seconds, listening carefully, making sure he was gone. Only then did I step back. Emily looked at me, her eyes wide. "He left?" she asked. "For now," I said. Her legs gave out slightly, and she sank into the nearest chair. "I thought," she started, but couldn't finish. "I know," I said softly. I walked over to her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "He's not as powerful as he wants you to believe," I added. She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. "I was so scared of him," she admitted. "I know," I said, and I let that fear control everything. I shook my head gently. "You're not anymore." She nodded slowly, and for the first time, the fear in her eyes didn't disappear, but it lost its grip. Because now, she had something stronger, the truth, and someone standing beside her. The strange thing about fear is that once you confront it, it doesn't disappear overnight. It lingers, but it changes. That night after Jason left, Emily didn't sleep in her room. She sat in the living room with me wrapped in a blanket, her eyes still flicking occasionally toward the front door, as if expecting another knock. "He looked different tonight," she said quietly, after a long stretch of silence. "You didn't see him?" I reminded her gently. I could hear it in his voice, she said. "He wasn't pretending anymore." I nodded. "That's because the illusion broke," I said. "He doesn't have control over you the way he used to." She stared down at her hands. "I gave him that control," she whispered. "No," I said softly. "You trusted someone who didn't deserve it. That's not the same thing." She didn't respond right away, because part of her still believed it was her fault. And in some ways it was, but not in the way she thought. You made a mistake, I continued, but you also stopped before it destroyed everything. That matters. She looked up at me. Does it? She asked. Yes, I said firmly, because it means you chose to change direction. And not everyone does that. She nodded slowly. I can't believe how far I let it go, she said. That's what fear does, I replied. It convinces you that the next bad decision will fix the last one. She exhaled shakily. And it never does. No, I said, it doesn't. The next morning felt different, not calm, but steadier. Like the worst part had passed, and now we were dealing with the aftermath instead of the chaos. Emily moved more slowly, more thoughtfully. She checked her phone, but not obsessively this time. When it buzzed, she didn't jump. He hasn't called again, she said. Good, I replied, but something about that didn't sit right with me. Men like Jason didn't just walk away. They regrouped, and that meant something was coming. Around mid-morning, my phone rang. Not Emily's, mine. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Emily noticed immediately. Don't answer it, she said quickly. I considered that for a moment. Then I shook my head. If this is him, I said, avoiding it won't help. Before she could protest, I answered. Hello? Silence. Then, Ms. Hayes. It wasn't Jason. It was a different voice. Professional. Measured.
This is Officer Daniels, he said. We spoke yesterday.
Relief washed through me, subtle but real. Yes, I said.
Of course. I wanted to update you, he continued. We've started looking into the information your daughter provided.
Emily leaned closer, listening.
And I asked, We've identified the individual you mentioned, he said. Jason Miller.
Emily's breath caught slightly. What does that mean? I asked.
It means, he said carefully, this isn't his first time.
The words hung in the air. My grip on the phone tightened. What kind of cases, I asked. Similar patterns, he replied. Financial manipulation, coerce, ion targeting individuals under pressure. The words hung in the air. My grip on the phone tightened. What kind of cases, I asked. Similar patterns, he replied. Financial manipulation, coercion, targeting individuals under pressure. Emily covered her mouth, her eyes widening. So, he's done this before, I said? Yes, Officer Daniels confirmed. A cold clarity settled over me. This wasn't just about Emily. This was a pattern, a system. And what happens now, I asked.
We're building a case,
he said.
But your report, it helps. It gives us more to work with.
Is he dangerous? Emily whispered from beside me. I relayed the question. There was a brief pause. He's not known for physical violence, the officer said. But he is known for intimidation. That matched exactly what we had experienced.
What should we expect? I asked. He may try to contact you again, he said. He may try to pressure you or shift tactics.
I nodded slowly.
We're ready for that,
I said.
Good, he replied. And remember, if he shows up again, you call us immediately.
I will, I said. After the call ended, the room felt clearer. Not safe, but understood. He's done this before, Emily said quietly. Yes, I replied. She sank into a chair, processing it. I wasn't special, she said. The words were soft, but they carried something deeper. Pain.
embarrassment, realization. No, I said gently. You were targeted. She looked up at me. That's what people like him do, I continued. They look for vulnerabilities. They don't create them. They exploit them. She nodded slowly. I felt so stupid, she admitted. You weren't stupid, I said. You were human. That seemed to settle something in her. Not completely, but enough. Later that afternoon, Emily did something I didn't expect. She picked up her phone. What are you doing? I asked. I'm sending him a message, she said. I tensed slightly. Emily. I'm not engaging, she said quickly. I'm ending it. I watched her carefully, then nodded. All right, I said, but keep it simple. She took a breath and typed. Her fingers hesitated for just a second. Then she hit send. What did you say? I asked. She looked at me. I told him I'm done, she said, that everything has been reported and he needs to stay away. I studied her face. There was fear there. Still, but something else too. Strength. The kind that comes from finally choosing yourself. That took courage, I said quietly. She gave a small, tired smile. I think I was just tired of being afraid, she said. I nodded. That's usually where courage starts. That evening we sat together again. But this time, the silence felt different. Not heavy, not tense, just quiet. I don't know what happens next, Emily said softly. Neither do I admitted. But I feel lighter, she added. I smiled slightly. That's what happens when you stop carrying something alone. She leaned her head back, closing her eyes for a moment. I'm sorry, she said quietly, for everything. I reached over, placing my hand over hers. I know, I said. And for the first time since this began, I believed it. Not just her words, but her change. Because this wasn't just about fixing a mistake anymore. It was about learning from it and choosing differently. And that was where healing begins. It didn't end all at once. There was no single moment where everything simply fell back into place. No clean line between before and after. Healing rarely works that way. Instead, it happened in small, quiet steps. Days passed, then weeks, and with each passing day, something shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, but steadily. The calls from Jason stopped. At first, that silence felt unsettling, like the calm before something worse. Emily would still glance at her phone occasionally, her body tensing for a split second whenever it buzzed. But gradually, that reaction faded. He hasn't tried to contact me again, she said one afternoon, almost as if she didn't quite believe it herself. He knows he can't control the situation anymore, I replied. And the police? She asked. They're handling it, I said. And now he knows you're not alone. That seemed to settle something inside her. Not completely, but enough. The investigation moved quietly in the background. Officer Daniels checked in a few times, asking for additional details, confirming timelines, requesting copies of messages. Each interaction was a reminder of how close we had come to something much worse, and how important it had been to stop when we did. He's under review for multiple cases, the officer told us during one call. Your report helped connect a few things. Emily listened carefully, her expression serious. So, other people went through this too? She asked. Yes, he confirmed. She was quiet after that, because now she wasn't just thinking about her own mistake. She was seeing the bigger picture, and that changed something in her. I wish I had known sooner, she said later that night.
So do a lot of people, I replied gently. She nodded. I don't ever want to feel that way again, she said. Like I'm trapped. Like I have no way out. I reached for her hand. Then you won't, I said, because now you know what that looks like. Life didn't go back to the way it was before. It became something different, something more honest. Emily found a new job, not right away, but eventually. Something smaller, more stable. She took her time this time, asking questions, double-checking everything. I'm not rushing into anything again, she said firmly, and I believed her. We started having dinner together again, not every night, but more often than not. And when we sat at that kitchen table, we talked, really talked. Not just about work or schedules, but about things that mattered, fears, mistakes, lessons, things we used to avoid. One evening, as we were clearing the dishes, she paused and looked at me. Why didn't you give up on me? She asked. The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? I said. I lied to you. Things we used to avoid. One evening, as we were clearing the dishes, she paused and looked at me. Why didn't you give up on me? She asked. The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? I said. I lied to you, she said. I went behind your back. I almost put everything at risk, and you still stood by me. I set the plate down slowly. Because you're my daughter, I said. She shook her head slightly. That's not enough for some people. Maybe not, I replied. But it is for me. She looked down, her voice softer now. I didn't deserve that. I stepped closer to her. Deserving isn't the point, I said gently. Love doesn't work like that. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they weren't from fear. They were from understanding. I'm going to do better, she said. I know you will, I replied. The house felt different now. Still the same walls, the same floors, the same memories. But something had changed. Not because of what almost happened, but because of what we chose to do when it did. We didn't hide. We didn't pretend. We faced it. Together. And that made all the difference. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about that moment in the county office. That signature. That one small detail that could have changed everything. And I realize something now that I didn't see then. It wasn't just a mistake that got caught. It was a turning point. A moment where everything could have gone one way. And instead, it went another. Because someone noticed. Because someone questioned it. Because we chose to tell the truth. And because of that, we got a second chance. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's this. Mistakes don't define you. What you do after them does. And sometimes, the hardest part isn't fixing what went wrong. It's having the courage to face it in the first place. But once you do, you realize something powerful. You were never as trapped as you thought. You just needed someone to remind you that you weren't alone. Some of the hardest lessons in life don't come from failure itself, but from the moment we finally stop running from it. What happened to Emily wasn't just a story about deception or a bad decision. It was a reminder of how easy it is to get lost when fear takes over. When we feel trapped, ashamed, or overwhelmed, we often believe the only way out is to fix everything quietly, quickly alone. But the truth is, the deeper we hide a mistake, the heavier it becomes. Silence doesn't protect us. It isolates us. Real strength begins in a much quieter place. It begins the moment we tell the truth, even when our voice shakes, even when we're afraid of judgment,
even when we think we've gone too far to turn back. Because the truth does something powerful. It breaks the illusion of control that fear creates. It reminds us that we are not alone, that there are people who will stand beside us, not because we are perfect, but because we are human. And maybe the most important lesson of all is this love. Real love does not disappear when mistakes happen. It shows up strongest in those moments. It stands firm when everything else feels like it's falling apart. It doesn't excuse the wrong, but it gives us the courage to face it and grow beyond it. So, if you've ever found yourself in a moment where you felt stuck, ashamed, or afraid to admit the truth, this is your reminder. It's never too late to choose a different path. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever faced a moment where telling the truth felt harder than hiding it? What would you have done in Emily's place? Share your feelings in the comments, and if stories like this speak to you, don't forget to subscribe. There are so many more stories about resilience, family, and second chances waiting to be told.